Hi, Paige here, the 1 Foot Gamer. How's it going, everybody? I'm all right. It's my birthday. For my birthday, my family got this shirt of Data and Spot, and I got this Rick and Morty hat, so that's why I'm sporting that stuff. And today, we're going to be looking at the first edition AD&D Monster Manual. And we'll look at the Rule Cyclopedia a little bit. I'm not going to put the Rule Cyclopedia up on screen, though, because, well, we'll see why we're looking at it. Now, your first edition Monster Manual had 209 different monster types, some of which had multiple subtypes. Now, 27 of these original 209 did not end up making the cut for D&D long term. And on a bit of a tangent, this showed the first sign of somebody at TSR having an obsession with sea monsters. Over 30 of the monsters of the original 209 are underwater monsters, and half of those are only suitable for underwater campaigns. You know, where the players are actually swimming around underwater, because these monsters are unable to threaten a sailing ship of any size. And the number of nearly useless underwater monsters absolutely exploded once you got into secondary monster books and second edition in particular. So I don't even know if that was Gary's fetish, because he was gone by second edition. So I'm not sure whose idea it was, but there's a lot of monsters, with water monsters, which is strange, because how many adventures can you think of that had any significant amount of underwater action? I can think of the Hogan trilogy and War Rafts of Kron for Expert D&D, and that's the only ones I can even think of. I've never, in any version of D&D, played anything where the players were actually underwater for any significant amount of time. Just usually things in a dungeon where somebody has to swim down to get something and might end up fighting something while holding their breath. So what we're looking for here is early monsters that eventually vanish or just didn't stand the test of time. I skipped all the normal animals, giant animals, and dinosaurs. They usually ended up getting a stat block somewhere or another in the system, even if they didn't make the main monster books. But what we're looking for here is everything else that Gary felt was necessary to include in the first edition Monster Manual that just later wasn't all that necessary, despite the fact that the number of monsters kept growing with every version of the game. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to order the monster books in this order. The first edition Monster Manual, the second edition Monster Manual, the Dungeons & Dragons Rule Cyclopedia, and then third edition. I didn't check fourth or fifth edition to see if any of the monsters cropped back up, largely because I doubt they did, and because third edition introduced a lot of monsters that became iconic in their own way, and those are more likely to have been carried over than the bringing back something that was only in the first Ed Monster Manual. And the Rule Cyclopedia is significant because in this research I found out that there are very few monsters that went first edition, second edition, third edition, and skipped the Rule Cyclopedia. If it stopped being in the Rule Cyclopedia, it almost certainly wasn't in third edition either. All right, let's get into this book here. All right. Very first one that didn't make it, the Axbeak. See him right here, little big old flightless bird. Barely looks like it even has wings in this picture. 3 hit die thing, 3 attacks. Did not appear, and it was only in the first Ed Monster Manual. Not sure if it ever appeared in any adventures or anything else. And kind of sad. It looks like a cool monster. I guess it's only good for outdoor. It doesn't look like the kind of thing that would be in a dungeon, does it? No. Alright, what's our next one up? The Baluchitherium. Because this isn't a dinosaur. It's a 20-foot tall, long-legged prehistoric rhino. And as far as I found, this didn't appear anywhere else in the system other than the AD&D Monster Manual, and I'm not exactly sure why it's here, because it certainly wasn't anywhere else. Alright, let's skip to the next pit. Go through that beautiful beholder there. Where are we? We need to find another monster that didn't make the cut. Oh, here we go. The brain mole. Psionic mole. This also existed in second edition, but then it stopped. You're going to see that as a pattern. These psionic monsters, which were in first edition and second edition, and then they dropped them. Also, I kind of think it's weird. Did psionics exist in white box D&D? I don't think they did. But the reason that's relevant is because the Monster Manual came out a year before, I think 2 years before the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I believe that's what had the psionics in it. So I'm not sure how people were able to use these monsters at that, that early time. What's next on the list? The Catoblipas. Maybe they're cutting things based on how hard they are to say the name. Now, this is a big old death ray spewing, long-necked swamp buffalo, and it got dropped after second edition. Kind of a cool monster, but it's, also, I guess third ed and rules didn't like. No, Rule Cyclopedia dropped it. I guess as players don't like things, save or die monsters, and like this and Medusas, and this is not nearly as iconic as a Medusa, so it did not make the cut. Next up, they didn't even put a picture of it, Cerebral Parasite, a tiny insect that feeds on psionic power that they for some reason gave a full stat block to, despite the fact that it doesn't have things like hit points or attacks or really anything. It's the size of a flea, and it disappeared after the first edition Monster Manual. I call things like that, really, those are trap monsters. A monster that's not really a monster, it's really more of a trap. We'll skip through all the demons and dinosaurs. Dragons, they all went forward. I didn't check every dragon type to see if it went forward, but they only expanded the types of dragons in later editions, so I'm sure that most of them made it. Okay, here we go. Next up, the Ear Seeker. Also no photo. Tiny insect that lays eggs in your ear that hatch and kill you. Now, this was presented with a full stat block for some reason, even though it's a tiny insect that anything would kill if they touched it. But there's zero guidance on how to use the things. Basically, what these things do is they crawl into your ear, lay eggs, and the eggs hatch and kill you. But there's no real guidance on how to use these. When would these get in the player's ears? I'm not sure. Well, a little bit sure. The few times I've seen them used, they've always been in doors that thieves would listen at, and then they'd crawl in the thieves' ear and kill them. All right, let's find some more. The eye floating. Also, no photo. Why bother to draw a photo of this thing, right? This is a paralyzation fish. First edition only. Didn't make it past the first Monster Manual. And it's part of the strange underwater focus that the first Monster Manual had. Now, alright, well, I can't even really edit that out because I'm filming with two cameras. Isn't that good? Alright, next up on the list is the Intellect Devourer. Can we find it? It's basically a brain on legs, and it's psionic. There it is. Look at that thing there. And it was only in first and second edition, and then it was gone. Now, this next one I know I'm going to spell wrong. The Exotichetal. Basically, these are manta rays with character classes. They don't truly have character classes, but they might as well. These were in first and second edition, gone by the Rules Cyclopedia. Not in third, as far as I know. More of the underwater obsession. Now, when I wrote my own game, Redbox Fantasy, I omitted the vast majority of the undersea monsters that were commonly listed in the game, just keeping a small selection of the commoner ones that might actually be encountered by a boat or in shallower water. Because here's the thing. If you're actually going to have yourself an underwater swimming campaign, which I don't know anybody who ever actually has done that, you don't actually need all these specific extra underwater monsters. You can simply take existing stat blocks and use them as underwater creatures. Nope, you need an underwater mount. Horse, bam, swimming horse. You've got your underwater mount. Doesn't need a separate stat block. Alright, the next up is the keyrin. Where is the keyrin? Look at that thing. Big old flying unicorn. I just assume it flies. Does it fly? Be weird if it didn't. Yeah, it flies. Incredibly powerful, lawful good flying unicorn with godlike powers. What is this monster for? I mean, all this thing can really do is show up the PCs. I mean, this thing is like a psionic master and an archmage at the same time. You know, and, you know, monsters like this and unicorns and other similar always good monsters, one of the reasons why when I made the Redbox Fantasy Big Book of Baddies, I made sure that there existed no monster type that didn't have some variation of it that was suitable for fighting. Because otherwise, what's it there for other than saving the PC's bacon? And it's not fun when a monster comes along and saves your character. Not fun to me, at least. Oh, if anybody wants to see that book, it is on Lulu.com. If you search for Redbox Fantasy Page Oliver, you'll find it. It is a free download on Lulu, or you could buy a physical copy. And if you know how to play, if you're watching this video, you'll understand the stat blocks. It's a little bit different than AD&D or than 3rd Ed, but you'll understand it. Alright, next up is the larva. Somehow I don't think this will have a... Oh yeah, this does have a picture. The larva, which was only in the 1st edition Monster Manual. It's a wretched, evil soul in the form of a worm that lives in the realm of Hades. Now, this is what I'd call a waste of space monster, because it only has 1 hit die and can only do 1d4 plus 1 damage, which makes it unable to threaten any characters who are powerful enough to get to where they live. You think 2nd and 3rd level characters are adventuring in Hades? No. This larva would be encountered by 14th and 15th level characters that it would have 0 chance of hitting, and that could wipe out and the entire batch of them could be wiped out by a single spell, even if every one of them makes their saves. These things should probably have just been part of the background description of an area, and that's probably why they were dropped after the 1st Ed Monster Manual. Alright, what do we got next? The Lucrata. Look at that photo there. Basically, ugly nonsense monster, horse-shaped, features from many different animals. The one interesting thing about them is, though, they have human intellect, they can speak human languages, they can imitate voices and sound human. These were in 1st and 2nd edition, and then they were gone by the Rule Cyclopedia. Alright, next up, we need a trap monster. The Lurker above. It's a dungeon-specific, powerful flying manta ray that is also a trap monster. So they hang out on ceilings and then fall down and suffocate their enemies. These appeared in 1st and 2nd edition, and then were gone from the game. Alright, the Morkoth is next. The Morkoth has a great picture. Let's find it here. Where you at, Morkoth? Morkoth, look at that guy there. Morkoth is an underwater trap monster who lives at the center of a spiral of tunnels, and the Morkoth charms and eats the people who enter the tunnels. Now, the Morkoth has a nice Gigaxian feature in that it has an ability with a way to possibly overcome it. However, the way to overcome it is so strange that nobody would think of it unless they read the Monster Manual, and it has a relatively low success. Basically, the Morkoth reflects all spells cast at it. Unless you get 2 spellcasters to simultaneously cast spells at it, and one of the spells is Dispel Magic. Then, you've got yourself a 50% chance that the 2nd spell will affect the Morkoth. Now, of course, the Morkoth's still going to get a savings throw, of course, and Morkoth being a 7 hit die thing, which should, I believe, save as a wizard, because it's a magical type of creature. That means that it's got a base save of 10 against spells, giving a net 22% chance that the Twin Spell Gambit would even work. This did go on to 2nd edition, but then it was gone. Alright, we got to go through a bunch of the book here. Peryton. We got to find the Peryton. There it is. Look at that thing. The Peryton, combination of deer and eagle with a very high damage output for its hit dice, especially for something that appears in groups. And it has hit roll bonuses too. And it needs a magic weapon to hit. And it has human intelligence. So there's interesting things that could be done with this. I mean, these could, especially, well, they go up to groups at 8. This could be a tough fight for a mid 6th to 7th level party. You could end up with dead characters. These did carry forward to 2nd edition, but then they were gone. Oh, same page here. The Piercer. Another trap monster. Stalactites that fall on people from the ceiling, making only that single attack before being unable to do anything else again. And then they were gone. Oh, sorry. They were gone by the Rules Cyclopedia. This is just a tangent, but at this point in my research, I happened to notice the Headsman in the Rules Cyclopedia. That's one of several hidden NPC-only classes that pop up in the various monster books as stat blocks, rather than being presented as character classes. The Headsman could either be an executioner or an assassin. Not quite sure why both those roles why both those roles had to be the same class or stat block, but apparently they are. Also not exactly sure why an executioner character could get up to 12 hit dice in the first place. Who knows? And the Headsman only appeared in the Rules Cyclopedia, as far as I recall. All right. The Qasa. Look at that guy. A little magical humanoid demon that often served as a familiar to chaotic evil creatures. This was in 1st and 2nd edition, and then it was gone. All right. Now, if there weren't enough manta rays already, there is a ray entry in the 1st edition Monster Manual with 3 types of rays. Manta rays did continue forward in the game, having stat blocks in every edition that I've looked at, but Gary Gygax seemed to have a special obsession with manta rays, creating many offshoots and variants and things that were shaped like manta rays and inspired by manta rays. And the manta ray, there's 3 variants of the manta ray in the 1st edition book, but by the time you get to 2nd edition, that had shrunk to a 1 stat block. All right, let's look at Sea Lion. It's not the Sea Lion you think it is. There it is. Sea Lion. Half fish, half lion. And fully gone by the time the Rules Cyclopedia come out. Although 3rd edition D&D did have the seemingly similar on the surface sea cat that I never saw used in anything, but it's a very different monster once you dug into the stat block, and I'm not exactly sure what it looked like because I was reading it off the SRD and not, which now has broken photos, and not my Monster Manual because I didn't want to go downstairs. Remember, I've only got 1 leg, so to get to my basement, I got to crawl down on my butt. If I'm going downstairs, it's a big deal. All right, next up, the Shido. Look at that guy. Yet another flying horse, psionic, lawful good, overpowerful hero monster. This one, however, has a human face instead of a unicorn head. And they appear in groups huge enough to upstage the heroes whenever they show up. These were in 1st and 2nd edition and gone by the Rules Cyclopedia. Also on this page, we got the Shrieker. The Shrieker later, I believe, turned into not being a proper monster, but being a trap. I might be remembering that wrong, too. All right, next thing, Slithering Tracker. Why give it a photo? There's no need. It's another dungeon trap ooze creature that was in 1st and 2nd edition and then gone. And this one prefers sleeping victims. Basically what this thing would do is it's almost impossible to detect, so it would just follow the party until they decided to hole up in a room and go to sleep, and then it would kill them. All right, next up. Oh, look at that picture. That's a nice photo. The Strangleweed, also. Why give it a picture? No need. What the game needed is more trap monsters, and specifically ones that try to drown characters. And the Strangleweed is intelligent kelp who just wants to drown creatures even though they're neutral in alignment. And that's what they did. They drowned creatures, and they were gone by the Rules Cyclopedia. Ooh, very next one, the Sioux Monster. A psionic monkey appearing in groups of 1 to 12 with 5+5 hit dice. And like every other psionic creature in the first Ed book here, it was gone by the Rules Cyclopedia. The Thought Eater. A relatively pitiful psionic ethereal platypus in 1st and 2nd, gone by the Rules Cyclopedia. All right. And I'm sure one of my younger friends would hear me say Thought Eater and think something completely different, but I'm not going to go there because I am not of that generation. Then the next one up, Titano here, or Titanothere. Prehistoric, non-dinosaur. Got its own entry in the first edition Monster Manual, and then never appeared again. It doesn't really have any distinctive reason to exist. It's just a 12 hit dice creature with 1 attack and can charge and trample. I bet it's very similar to the Rhinoceros stat block. Okay, same page. The Trapper, which is indeed a trap monster. Now, second edition took this and the lurker above and another creature and combined them all into the same entry, and they didn't include these in the Rule Cyclopedia nor in third edition or later. And finally, all the way down here towards the end, where is it at? The Windwalker. This is an elemental air creature with extremely specific abilities that it uses to fight or kill the characters, and it was only in first edition. Alright, and I think that's going to bring us to the end of the book, because the rest of this stuff continued forward to the game. Yetis and zombies and such. So, did you ever use any of these monsters? Are any of these monsters iconic to you? If so, let me know about it down in the comments. Thanks, and I hope to see you again soon.